Are we live?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Happy Saturday. And this is Michelle from the Bead Gallery, and I'm here to show you how to do another fun project today. We're going to be making leaf earrings with 2 leaf components per earring. Okay? So we're going to wait a few seconds for a couple of other people to join us. Let us see where we are. Okay. And then I'll get started. The project today is really easy. This wire, it's a little bit harder than the original leaf component that I showed you, only because we're going to be doing 2 of them per side, and we're going to hook them together so one leaf sits inside the other. That's a little bit tricky. So we'll see how that works. I believe in the description to this video, there is a link, or there's the actual PDF with pretty good instructions. I formatted that sheet this morning and it has the supplies you need. There's a little bit of a correction to the supplies. You actually only need 13 inches of 20 gauge half hard wire, even though we said 18. At least you'll have extra and you'll have some practice, or you at least have some extra wire in case you make a boo-boo. Okay, so let's see if anybody's here. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to get started then, I guess. The first thing I'm going to do is tell you to make the leaf components we're going to do today. We're using 20 gauge half hard sterling silver wire. Okay, it looks like this. It's half hard because we want a little bit of springiness in the metal. I do like the strength of the wire better than using 20 gauge soft. 20 gauge is actually a little bit on the thin side for me. I'm more used to working with 14 and 16 gauge wire to make components. But because we wanted a very light and delicate look for this earring, we're going to use 20 gauge half hard. Okay, and then I have a few other pieces of stuff on my workspace. So just to make the leaf components, you just need the 20 gauge half hard wire. If you want to make the earrings, then you're going to need a pair of ear wires and some beads and head pins or wire so you can attach your beads to the leaf after. But for the first part, we're just going to be making the leaf component. So we're just going to be working with the wire and the tools that I'm going to start with. And they are listed on the sheet that we included in the description. You're going to be using chain nose pliers, round nose pliers, flat nose pliers. There we go. So these are your basic wire wrapping tools that we use a lot in a lot of our wire working videos and instructionals and techniques. So we use these 3. And then we're going to need a flush cutter. Now I'm only using 20 gauge wire today, which is thin, but I'm still using the Lindstrom cutter that cuts flush up to 16 gauge. Okay. And then that's the, and then I need a large 3-step wrap and tap. Okay. This tool is really awesome. In addition to doing these kinds of leaf components, this tool is super awesome for also curving ring shanks, because you see how big the jaws are. You can make some nice sort of ring preforms. Okay. So that's a large 3-step wrap and tap. So we're going to be using these pliers and this cutter for the first part. All right, so now I'm going to move over to the close-up and get started making the leaf components. Let's see. Okay. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is to pre-cut my wire lengths. So to make the large leaf component, I'm going to need 4 inches of wire per component. I'm actually going to measure 4 inches just once. And make sure that my ends are flush cut, so you want it to be flat. So we're going to trim off this end here, like this. So that's one piece. And then I'm going to do a second piece, and I'm just going to measure it against the first piece that I did. So they'll be equal in length. Okay, I'm going to flush cut the tip of that wire, and then line up my 2 pieces of wire and trim. And hopefully they're the same length, and hopefully they're close to 4 inches each. Okay, I'm going to pre-cut the wire for the smaller leaves too right now. The instructions say 2.5 inches. So I'm going to cut 2 pieces that are 2.5 inches each. I'm going to just make sure this end is flush. I'm going to measure 2.5 inches. Right here. Okay, flush cut that end because this end is still pointy. When you cut wire with a flush cutter, only the edge that touches the back of the cutter like this will be flush. The other end of the cut will be pointy, so you have to cut that away. Okay, so I'm going to line this one up like this and flush cut that. So now I have my 2 pieces that are also 2.5 inches. And then I'm going to put my extra wire on the side. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do with the longer pieces of wire, because I'm going to make the large leaves first, is mark the center. Now you can just grab both wires like this. Actually, I'm going to do them one at a time. It's easier. And we need a Sharpie so I can mark the center of my wire. So the center of 4 inches is 2 inches. So we want to mark it at 2 inches. There you go. And this is just regular Sharpie. Okay. Then I'm going to turn a loop on one end of my wire with my round nose plier. Not that one. There we go. And you want to make sort of a big loop here because this is going to be at the top of the leaf. So I'm going to work close to the base of my round nose plier. What you're going to do is grab the very tip of the wire with your plier and roll, while bracing the wire against the jaw of the plier with your left thumb. Okay, I'm just sort of pressing it against there while making small rolling motions until I have a loop. And you want the loop to be touching the wire right here. Okay, so I'm going to do that again for the second long piece of wire. Again, we're going to grab the very tip of the wire and roll while pressing the wire against the jaw of the plier with your left thumb. Now 20 gauge is really pretty soft, even though this is half hard. And you kind of want your loops to be about the same size, which these are. Okay. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get the large wrap and tap plier, and we're going to make a horseshoe with the wire. Okay, so you have to look for the mark that you made, and I'm going to move the mark on this side so I can see it. When you make these leaves, there's going to be a front and a back to the leaf. And when I make earrings, I like to make mirroring shapes. So you can pay attention to the way the loops are facing me and the way that I hook the wire into the loop to close up my shape. Okay. So here we go. I have my mark on this side. I'm just going to make a horseshoe on the bottom step of the large wrap and tap, so you can pretty much grab the wire at the dot and then pull the wire around the jaw of the plier, like so. So when I did this, I made sure that the loop that I made is curling towards me, like this, and it's not curling away from me and then turning the loop like that, because I want the loop to be on the outside of my leaf, not the inside. Okay, and we shall see that in a few minutes. Okay, so we're just going to curve the wire in a preliminary kind of way like this, and I'm going to do the same thing for this side. So grab the dot with your wrap and tap, and I'm going to make sure that the plastic jaw of the wrap and tap is closer to me, and I'm holding the wrap and tap plier straight up and down, and then you're going to push the wire around the jaw like this, and it just curves it. It won't mold tightly to the jaw because we are using half hard wire. So if this were soft wire, it would mold better and it just follow the shape that I'm pushing it around. But because this is half hard wire, you notice how much spring back you get, yeah, around the jaw of the plier. And that is fine. Okay. If you only had soft wire at home, you still could do this project. It's just that you would have to hammer your piece really well to work hard in it and make sure that it keeps its shape after you're done. Okay, so in this case, it's easier to just use half hard wire to begin with. Okay, so when I say I want to mirror my pieces, I'm going to make sure that they look like this. You see how one loop curves this way and the other loop curves away in the opposite direction? Okay, I'm going to make sure that when I close off my leaves, the loops stay in those kind of directions. So I'm getting ready to close my leaf now. And I'm just going to grab the very tip of this end of the wire and make sure that you see over here, the end of the wire is pretty much on this end of my plier. And I'm going to bend at a 90-degree angle, like this. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm keeping the wire in the orientation that I want it to be in for the final result. Okay, so I'm not flipping it around. I just want it to be like this. And I'm going to do the same thing, grab the wire so that the tip of the wire is near the edge of the plier like this, and turn a 90-degree loop, 90-degree hook, angle, like this. So this angle is perpendicular to the plane of the loop, because what I want to do is hook it in like this. So we'll do that for both sides. There we go. But if I just left it like that, the hook could pop out and then my shape would open up, and that would not be good. So what we want to do is curl this hook shut. I'm going to use my chain nose plier to grab the tip of the wire that's sticking through my loop, and I'm going to pull it around like this. Okay, and then I'm going to use my chain nose plier to sort of mold that into a hook shape and close it. So now my shape is closed, and even if I jiggle it a little, it will not open. So you see the wire is hooked into the first large loop that I made. Do the same thing for this side. Grab the tip of the wire, hook, and pull it around, and then mold it into a loop. Get a little bit of a squeeze. Okay, so the shape is closed as well. So now we have two teardrop shapes, and they are mirror images of each other. That is what we want. Okay. And now we're going to shape the wire into the leaf. It's important that you didn't rub your Sharpie mark off at this point, because we need to use that as a reference so we know where to bend the tip of your leaf. Okay, so I'm going to do that now. I got my flat nose plier, and I'm going to insert it into my teardrop shape like this, with the left edge of the plier touching the dot like this. And notice that my shape makes a 90-degree angle with my plier like this. Okay, and then I'm going to just use my thumb to brace the wire against the edge of the plier to make a point. So you just go like this. Okay, so that is what our leaf looks like so far. And you see my angle is bent at the dot that the Sharpie marker is making. Do the same thing for this side. Again, the left edge of my plier is touching the dot. And I'm going to use my thumb to brace against the edge of the plier as I bend. That. Okay, so now we have two matching shapes. Some people would like to try and do a shortcut by working both of the wires at the same time. And you can. I'm sure you can. I just find it easier to work with one piece of wire at a time. But some people, what they do is they'll either hold the two wires together and do the same motions for both wires at the same time. I'm not discouraging you from trying. I find that a little bit harder to do. So if you just sort of make your marks in the same places and you make all of your loops the same size, your pieces should match. And even if they don't match, leaves are not all identical. So they can have some variation and it'll still be cool. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is make a little curve in my leaf at the bottom. And I usually like to do that on the bumpier side. So there's a little extra wire on this side. I'm going to bend it inwards to make a curve. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to put the flat nose plier back into the leaf shape. And now the right edge of the plier is touching my dot. And the angle is just socked right in there. And we're just going to bend against there like that. Just slightly. Repeat on this side. Go on the fat side, sock your plier into that angle, and then just bend. And now we have two sort of matching sides of leaves. Okay. All right. Then what we're going to do is we're going to hammer our shape. But if you want, what I'm going to do is make the smaller pair of leaves at this point. So you can see how I made these large leaves again. Okay, so I have my smaller leaves. I need to mark the midpoint of 2.5 inches, which is 1.25 inches. Like that. So, even though I'm marking the midpoint of the wire, the reason why the leaves didn't turn out the same length on each side and be like balanced is because this loop here is much larger than this loop here. So this side that had the smaller loop stayed longer. Yeah, so more of this loop ate up this wire. That's why it's shorter on this edge. Okay, but that's what we want. We want it to be a little asymmetrical. Okay, and there's many ways to make these leaves. So this is just one way. Okay, after I mark the midpoint of my wire, again, I am going to get my round nose plier. Work on the base, so go all the way to the bottom almost. And turn a loop by grabbing the very tip of the wire, bracing with your left thumb, and rolling until you get a loop. Like this. One more time. So now we have 2 loops on our wires, 1 on each end. And then I'm going to go and get my large wrap and tap again, and I'm going to make a horseshoe, but I'm only going to do it on the top step of the large wrap and tap. So for the large leaf, I use the bottom step. For the small leaf, I'm going to use the top step. And again, I'm going to just grab the dot and pull the wire around like this. So you notice my horseshoe and everything is a lot smaller this time. Let's do the same thing. Again, on the top step, grab the dot, push the wire around the jaw of the plier. So now we have 2 smaller horseshoes, and again I'm going to want to make the loops mirror and the shapes mirror. So I'm going to leave it in this orientation here. Notice that this one, the loop is not quite in the plane of the horseshoe shape, which is okay. We can sort of just flatten it down at this point. You can always get your nylon hammer and just hammer it a little bit. Or you can use your fingers or your flat nose plier and just twist it just a little. There we go. Okay. And again, we're going to turn the hooks and hook our teardrop shut. So again, you grab the wire so that the tip of the wire is on this edge of the plier. So there's like 1 length of wire through there. Turn 90 degrees and hook it in like this. Same thing. Like this. Hook it in. Okay, and then we're going to close our shapes by using the chain nose plier to grab the wire that's hooking through the loop. Grab the tip and pull it over and around. Okay, so now there's a closed loop that's hooking into the large loop. Okay, last one, we're going to grab the tip of the wire and hook it around. And then just mold it into a loop shape around the loop. Around the large loop. Loop opened up just a little so you can squeeze it shut. Okay, so now we have our smaller leaf shapes here, and I just need to bend the points into the leaves. Again, we're going to grab our flat nose plier and make it so that the plier is at a 90-degree angle to the shape. Left edge of the plier is touching the Sharpie mark, and we're going to bend against it like this. Same thing for this side. 90 degrees. Left edge of the plier touching the dot, and bend. So you make a nice crisp angle at the dot. And then on the fat side, we're going to turn a curve inward so it has like a little bit of a shape. Okay. Just go like that. Same thing for this side. So we're putting it in so the angle, the plier is resting in that angle, and then we're going to bend on the fat side. Like this. These almost look like little butterfly wings. Okay, so now we have our 4 leaf shapes. They are not done yet, but I'm going to switch the camera angle because I'm going to introduce some new tools that I will be using for this section. Okay, so I have my leaf shapes here. I have 4 of them. I have 2 big ones and 2 small ones. And they are not quite done yet because we'll need to hammer our wire components. It's kind of important because this is 20 gauge wire. It's still soft even though it is half hard. So we'll want to work harden it a little bit and also give it some character by flattening the wire strategically in places and adding a little bit of texture. So it's kind of nice. And the tools that we're going to use for this section are my bench block here. This one is steel and it has the rubber base, one of our favorite ones to use because the rubber base keeps the block steady and it deadens the sound just a little. And then I'm going to use a chasing hammer, a big one. It's one of my favorite ones. And then I'm going to also use the ball side for texturing after I flatten the wire. And then I'm going to use a baby chasing hammer. These are my 2 staple hammers that I use kind of all the time at home. And then this is to get hammering into the tighter spots or smaller shapes. So this one's really good. And then I'm going to use a nylon hammer. Okay. All of these hammers will harden your wire. They'll work hard in your wire. These 2 hammers though, because they have metal faces, they are also going to flatten your wire and add texture. Because the steel in the hammer faces is harder than the sterling silver that you are using, so it can move the metal, it can flatten it, and it can impart texture because it is harder than the sterling that you're using. The nylon hammer is just for hardening the wire at the end. Because the nylon or this plastic stuff is softer than the sterling that you are using, it does not flatten your metal and it will also not impart any texture. It will just harden it. Okay? Because it is softer. So the harder substances win out when you're working with wire. Okay? So let's get started with the hammering. I'm going to move to the close-up again. There you go. Okay. And I'm going to center my bench block on the camera. I hope it's centered. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to use is the larger chasing hammer. Okay, and your pieces will have a front and a back to them. The front is the side where you don't see the loop that is hooking into this large loop here. So you see the hook. When you look at it from the front, you should just see kind of unbroken wire, and it ends. If you look on the back, you'll see the actual hook itself. So keep that in mind when you're hammering, because we are only going to be hammering the fronts of the shapes. We're not going to hammer the backs because you won't see them. Okay? So always make sure you're hammering the fronts of your pieces in this project. So the first thing I'm going to do to hammer is I like to hammer the large curve. I like to put a little more width on the curve right here. So when you hammer your piece, you can concentrate on that section that you want flattened the most. And you apply the most pressure by hitting harder in that section. But you have to remember that this is 20 gauge wire. It's kind of thin, so you don't want to hammer it too much or too hard, because you can flatten the wire too much really easily. This is not like 16 gauge wire. And I'm kind of squeezing the shape with my fingers here. So I'm applying pressure like this to, one, hold the shape in place, and two, it kind of affects how this curve is because I'm hitting it in the shape that I want, so it will kind of stay. So it'll stay kind of fatter because I'm squeezing it this way. Okay, and easy with the hammering because this is very thin wire. Okay, so I have my shape flattened here, and then I did not hammer as much here. I'm going to hammer it a little bit more to add texture. And then I'm going to go on this side, the long side, and I'm going to add a little bit more width right here on this curve and keep it kind of thin near the tip and near the top. Okay. And if you want to, we can hammer this loop just a little, and that's where the small chasing hammer comes in. So whenever you hammer metal, like sterling, with a metal hammer, you notice that it gets flatter. And also, sometimes your shapes will distort a little bit. They'll change shape because you're stretching the metal when you're flattening it. Okay? So notice that this loop opened up just a little when I hammered it because we stretched the metal over here, so it kind of spreads open. You have to adjust that back once you're done hammering and texturing your wire. So we'll just leave it now for a little bit, and I'm going to add some texture to my wire with the ball end of my larger chasing hammer. You want to choke up on your hammer like this so you have better control over where you are hitting, and you don't want to hit too hard. You don't have to hit hard at all when you're texturing. So I'm going to go around the entire perimeter of my leaf. So when you hammer with the ball side of the hammer, notice you get a very nice kind of dapped texture. One place I am being careful not to hit is this overlapping section right here. You don't want to hammer that at all. You just want to leave it. So that's, I keep it off the block when I'm hitting. So you notice I'm maneuvering the piece a lot on my block to hit it. And I more turn the piece than move my hammer around the bench block. I like to kind of hit consistently in the same place all the time. So I move my piece and I turn it so that I don't have to move my hammer all over the block. Okay. And then if you want to harden it a little bit more, we're just going to use the nylon hammer and give it a few good hits. This. And because I'm avoiding this section a bit, sometimes you can get a little bend here. If you want to fix that, you can just squeeze it with the flat nose plier, just gently, to flatten it out. Okay, so there I have my leaf. I'm going to leave the other large leaf to hammer after the show, because I'm going to just work on completing one side of my earring today. Okay, so I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to hammer my small leaf now. If there's time, I'll assemble the second side of the earring. Again, I'm concentrating on the large curve first. Then I'm going to turn and work on the long side. Now, my quarters are a lot smaller on the smaller leaf, so sometimes it'll be easier to use the small chasing hammer from the start. So I'm going to switch. And on this hammer, there is two faces, and they look different. One is really flat, and one is kind of curved like a little bubble. I like to use that side more than the really flat side because it moves the metal a little bit faster, and you don't have to be as accurate in your angle of hitting. Okay. I would use the flat side, like if you're hammering on something like a ring mandrel or a curved surface. I like the bubbly side on a flat surface like a bench block. Okay. I'm going to hammer my loop just a little. Can I apologize if anybody has comments and I'm not seeing them or addressing them because I can't see my comments. Let's see. Okay. But if anybody has any questions, feel free to leave a comment and we'll address it. If not during the show, then after the show. Thank you very much for joining me today. Okay, I'm just hammering that. Okay, so my loop opened up just a little, but that's okay. We'll fix that. I'm going to put a little bit of texture with the ball side of my hammer. Here. Very light tapping. Okay, so now I got a bunch of texture on my wire. And I'm just going to hit it a couple more times with my nylon hammer just to harden it a little bit more. Okay, and remember, the nylon hammer will not impart a texture, nor will it flatten the metal, which makes it ideal for hitting it after you're satisfied with the texture of your metal, because it won't erase any of the texture you put on there as well. Alright, so now I have my two pieces hammered and I'm ready to connect them together. So normally when I make these leaf shapes, I don't always like to have such large loops here. I'll try to make them a little bit smaller, or yeah, smaller, because they're a little bit stronger when your shapes are small. So these are large, but they're large with a purpose, because I have to hook this loop into this leaf here, and it basically has to go through the loop of the larger leaf and through the leaf portion of the larger leaf. It has to span quite a bit of space, so I needed to make that loop bigger than I normally would. Okay, so now I'm going to connect the two pieces together. I'm going to move my bench block because I'm done hammering right now. Oop. Move my hammer. So what I'm going to use is my flat nose plier, and to connect the leaves together, I'm going to open the loop up on my small leaf. Now when you open your loops, you're going to open them like jump rings or like the loops on ear wires. We're just going to get the flat nose plier and swivel it open like this. Okay. And then we're going to hook it in. It's been a while since I did this. Hook it in there like this. So it is caught inside this loop and inside the leaf shape. It has to cover both. Then I'm going to swivel that shut like this. Okay, and ideally, now our small leaf should be hanging in the large one, inside, perpendicular. And then to finish off this earring, all you have to do is attach your ear wire to the loop of the larger leaf. So I'm going to swivel the loop on my ear wire open, hook on my leaf, and swivel the loop shut. Okay. So I'm going to switch cameras, and I'm going to show you this from the front facing camera. Okay, so I have one side of my leaf earring done. Hopefully you can see it. Okay, so now I have the smaller leaf hanging in the larger one at a perpendicular or right angle. And you can just leave it like this if you want. It's very simple. It's really nice though, because it's just very clean, straight silver, look very modern, but still kind of organic because of the leaf shape and the flowing curves. I really like it. If you want to jazz it up a bit more, like I'm going to attach some beads. Okay. So we're going to show how to attach beads to this right here. And what I'm going to use is Tahitian pearls, and you need a head pin. So a head pin is a piece of wire that has a little ball on the end. Sorry about that. Okay. So I need a head pin to go with my Tahitian pearl. And then on the inside leaf, I'm going to hang a very small briolette. And I'm going to do a technique called the head pin handle. So I need another head pin for that bead. Okay. So let's attach our beads now to my one side of the earring. Turn that this way. Okay, so I have my Tahitian pearl here, and I'm going to hang that off the bottom of my leaf, the large one. So I'm going to do a technique called basic wire wrap. I'm going to show you a trick that I do because I like to have as few coils as possible closing my wire wrap shut. So what I do is I just bend the wire against the top of the bead like this. So it's kind of at a right angle to the top of the bead. I'm going to get my my round nose pliers, and I'm going to sandwich the wire and pull the wire up, over, and around the top jaw of my plier. Then I'm going to switch from the top jaw to the bottom. This is basic wire wrap, so we have a video on this YouTube channel somewhere that shows you how to do this technique over and over. So if you need to learn how to do it or you need a refresher, please feel free to check that instructional video out. It's called the basic wire wrap. Okay, so I'm going to pull my wire around the bottom jaw of the plier and roll forward to 90 degrees. And this one, it's not 90 degrees, it's sticking up like that, so I'm going to pull it back down. So it is 90 degrees to the bead and the wire going through the bead. I'm going to use a flat nose plier to open my loop just a little so I can hook it onto my leaf like this. And then I want to coil the wire shut to keep my loop closed. Because I made the loop so close to the top of my bead, ideally I would only need one wrap to close it off. So let's see. There we go. So if anybody out there was wondering how I did single wrap, wire wrap loops, I am showing it to you right now. This is how I do my wire wrap loops that I use in all my jewelry. It's my trade secret. Here we go. Okay, so I wrapped it around one time. Then I'm going to trim my excess wire away like this. And if the wire sticks out just a little, which it is bound to do, you can use your chain nose plier and give it a little press to tuck that wire down. Okay. So now I have my Tahitian pearl attached to the bottom of my leaf. Okay, and then I'm going to attach a tip drilled bead to the inner leaf. This might be a little bit trickier. Let's see how this goes. I'm going to use a head pin to do a technique called the head pin handle. So you can address these briolets by doing tip drill wire wrap, which we also have an instructional video for here on YouTube. That one is called the briolet wrap, if you don't want to do this technique that I'm doing now with the head pins. This particular approach to wrapping this briolet is called the head pin handle. I'm going to make an angle with my plier like this. I'm going to get my flat nose plier in there and adjust the angle like so. And you can make a triangle by bending the wire over the top edge of your flat nose plier. So the length of this triangle leg is pretty much the width of your flat nose plier. Okay. And this tip drill bead is so teeny, it's a little bit hard to work with. The nice thing about this technique is that it allows the bead to hang a little bit closer to your component than doing a tip drill wire wrap, because a tip drill wire wrap, you have to have a little triangle of wire, then you have a loop of wire, and then you have some coils to hold your everything shut. This one's just a triangle, so it's like making a bail with a head pin. I'm going to attach it to my leaf. Like this. And then we will wrap this tail around the ball of the head pin. Or behind the ball of the head pin. Okay? So just hold both legs of the triangle like this as much as you can with your chain nose plier because it's a little bit tight in space. And then push the wire tail around behind the head, behind the ball of your head pin. So you're making a coil or a wrap between the bead and the head of your pin. Okay, and then sort of mold that nicely so it doesn't come off. You gotta make sure that loop that you made is really tight and it can't flip over the ball of the head pin. Trim the extra wire away and then we're done. Tuck the wire down. And there we go. We have the tip drill wire wrap bead, or the tip drilled bead attached to the leaf with a head pin. Okay, I'm going to switch to the front facing camera and show you my finished half of my earring. And then I think we will call it a day. Okay, let's switch. Let's see. I got it. Okay, so now here is my finished earring half. There you go. So it has a Tahitian pearl, then it has a tip drill bead, and we have our 2 leaf components. And then I think we're done here. So I really want to thank you for joining me today. I hope you will try this technique. Try making some leaves at home. It's really fun. You don't have to use really thick wire. As you can see, we just use 20 gauge half hard sterling silver wire here. You have to understand though that these shapes are not going to be like super sturdy, so you don't want really heavy things hanging on them, but these are perfect for earrings because they don't get pulled on. Okay, so there we go. We have our earring. Okay, let's go work on the other side off camera. Thank you so much for joining me today on our YouTube Live. I really, really appreciate you all coming down to watch. If you aren't subscribed to our channel yet, please subscribe to our channel and hit the little bell next to that so you get notifications when we come on live, like I am now, because I do like to have that interaction between everybody, and it's so nice to see you all. And so I hope you will join me again next time. I hope you all join me again next time. And I think that's it. So until next time, live, love, and create. Thank you so much.